When we have good news, what do we do with it?
Yeah, you get excited.
Get excited? What else do you do?
Share it.
You share it? You tell people. Is knowing Jesus good news?
Yes, absolutely.
Some people think so. I think so too.
Yeah.
Well, Jesus, I just got to read out these very well-known verses from in the Matthew's Gospel that Jesus said just before he went from meeting with his disciples after he died and after he rose again. He met with them and he gave them this special command. We know it, but I think we need to hear it again and again and again and again. Jesus said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. That's to Jesus. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. So he tells us to do something, but he doesn't say go alone. He tells us to go and tell people what we know of Jesus. You can't do more than that. He doesn't ask us to do more than that. But as a group of Christians, and when a lot of things happen through being in a group, we have our individual faith, but when we are together, there's a lot more that can be accomplished. And he's saying collectively to us all together, go and make disciples. Each one of us might only be able to tell a little bit, but together we help one another. And I think, we can just see from various people who've come into the church in the last, couple of years, that it hasn't just been through one person, but actually we're a group. We work together, and some people, do different tasks and different ways of welcoming people and helping people and making them feel at home, helping them to know more about God and all that kind of stuff. But together we do have a task to make disciples. That is to bring people to the point of being able to follow Jesus, commit their lives to Jesus, and baptising them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. This year there have been 3 people baptised, which is wonderful, and there's been other people baptised before that. And so that's our task. That's given to us. One person alone can't do it all, but together, that's our task. That means we need to be intentional about it. And I think as a church, we've become much more intentional about that. For those who've been here for a while, isn't that true? In the more recent years. This year has been a year, I think, and last year, of being more intentional about that. So we're not actually going out there, parading ourselves down the street and waving flags and saying, come to this church or come to Christ or anything like that. We're being ourselves. But in our hearts and in our minds, we need to be intentional when the opportunities arise. And so we started Open Wednesdays, and that's been lovely to meet other people. I don't come. I'm speaking for what I hear. I don't come normally. That's not to say I can't come. The day will come when I will show up. But I've also been busy with a lot of other things, and people have accepted that. Sometimes it's an intentional, planned thing, like when we did musicals. We could say, all right, in 3 or 4 months' time, we are going to be presenting the gospel. We're going to be presenting the story of Jesus or something about God. We're going to practice, we're going to prepare, and then we're going to invite a lot of people to come, and they will come, and we'll be able to tell them something. That's planned. That's intentional. And we are delighted to know that there were people who did become Christians through seeing our musicals. And we've heard that feedback, and so that's great when it's planned. But sometimes the planning doesn't happen. The intentionality has to be there in our own hearts and minds. Jesus said in John chapter 4, verse 35, "Do not say 4 months more and then the harvest. I tell you, open your eyes and look at the fields because they're ready for harvest now." Now, sometimes it comes upon us. I've never been a farmer. Some of you've got farming in your background. But, I still know the tiniest bit about gardening. And, certain plants you put in and, I can safely wait a few months before anything happens, so I shouldn't get too excited. I shouldn't jump up and down just yet. It's going to happen in time. But Jesus said we also need to be alert. And I want to read one little story from the Old Testament. So they didn't know about Jesus then, but, they just certainly did know about God. And I'm not going to read the whole story, but I'm going to just tell it in my own words. It comes from 2 Kings chapter 5. And it's a story where a little girl was put into a horrible, horrible situation. She was captured. And there were raiding armies that came and took her away from her family and took her off. And the guy who was in charge of the army from another country nearby was called Naaman. And he was a soldier. That's his job, So he went and raided and killed people and captured people, all that sort of stuff. And this little girl, we don't even know her name, she was taken into Naaman's home to serve his wife. So that was her job, to be a servant for Naaman's wife. Now, she noticed that there was a problem. There was a problem that, everybody knew about. And the problem was that Naaman had leprosy, and that's an infectious skin condition, and they didn't know how to solve it. And so in Israel, people who had that had to go outside the camp so they didn't infect other people. But anyway, Naaman had leprosy, was still allowed to be a captain and a soldier. In Israel that probably wouldn't have happened, but in his country it did. And this little girl was concerned about Naaman. Now, Naaman is the cruel captor. He's the one who took her. He's the one who now has separating her from her parents and family and everything that's familiar. This little girl comes from Israel. But she was concerned. She had compassion for this man, Naaman. And so she spoke up to her mistress, the woman, the wife of Naaman, and said, "I know a prophet back home, and if Naaman could get to that prophet would be able to heal him." Now, in fact, it's God who heals. But she spoke that word that set a chain of reactions. She did what she could, and you wouldn't think that being torn away from your family would be the ideal situation for you to be able to speak what you know about God. But there she was. And here was a situation where Naaman was in trouble because of his leprosy, and she said it. Now that word went from the lady to her husband, and he took hold of it because he hadn't heard that there was any help available. So he went to his king, the king of Aram. He went to the king and he said, "Look, there's a prophet in Israel and in the northern part of Samaria. It's a prophet in Israel, and apparently he can heal me if I can get there. The king said, oh, great, that'd be wonderful if you can be healed. And so he sent lots and lots of presents with him, and he wrote this letter to the king. And so the letter went to the king. When Naaman went before the king in Israel, he went with all his chariots and horses, and they came there, and the king was not very pleased because he said, I can't heal people. Why are you coming to me? I can't heal anyone. And he was very distressed because he couldn't do what he was asked to do. But there was someone who got the rumour, and that was the prophet Elisha. Now, Elisha is a man in the Old Testament, a prophet, who had a special ministry of miracles and healing. And he was actually said in many places throughout the stories about him that he was filled with, and he had on him the Holy Spirit. Sometimes it says Spirit of God. Mostly in the Old Testament it says Spirit of God. Same thing. It's God's Spirit, Holy Spirit. And he heard, and he sent a message and said, come to me. And so this big man went to see Elisha, and he expected a big show to happen. He thought this man would come out and he would call upon the name of the God, and he'd shout, and there'd be all kinds of drama happening, and then he'd be healed. There was no drama. Elisha didn't come out because it's not through drama. Drama can happen, but, healing doesn't come that way. Instead, he sent a message to say, go and bathe in the Jordan River, go under in the water 7 times. He was angry. Naaman was angry. He was angry because he said the Jordan River is a muddy river, not like my wonderful rivers in my country. What am I here for? Me, a great captain, you're telling me to go under that horrible water 7 times. He was dead proud. But then one of his servants said to him, well, come on, Captain, sir, this is not too hard for you to do. Just do it. Eventually he did. And guess what? He was healed. And when he was healed, something else happened. He realised that the God that was in Israel was much, much greater than the gods he knew about in his country. And so he actually made a personal decision and a personal commitment to follow the God of Israel. So he was converted. He became a believer in that God. Now, he wouldn't have had a lot of teaching, he wouldn't have known a lot, but his heart was changed. So that little girl who showed compassion in a difficult situation set off a chain reaction that meant that this man came to the Lord. Now, I don't know who this man told, but there would have been others because there were other soldiers there with him, lots of people with him, and who would have seen this change. So my guess is that there wasn't just one man who found God, but a whole group of them. And they probably told their families too. We don't know that part of the story because it's not written down. But it must have affected them. I just remember when I was in Hobart Church of Christ years ago, there was a lady called Bev, not this Bev, but another Bev, and she was very concerned about her friend Len, who was incapacitated really severely because he'd been a policeman, but he'd had an injury and he had a back disease, which was considered terminal. It was considered it couldn't be cured. I can't remember the name of it now, but it meant that he was incapacitated. He could no longer work. And then Black was his name. And so she was thinking, well, like he's not interested in God. He won't come to anything. He won't let me pray for him. He won't let me do anything, you know. And then the day came when a minister came to visit, and somebody who was well known came to visit another church, not the church we were attending, but we all knew people in lots of churches then anyway. And she heard that this man was coming and that he often prayed for people and they were healed. So she took a risk. And she said, Len, I know you are not interested normally in going to any of this sort of stuff, but would you consider going? She took a risk. And to her surprise, he was so desperate that he said yes. He went, and as he was listening to the talk that the man gave, he was gaining understanding. And then the man prayed for him. And I'm not sure if he went forward. I don't remember those details. But he said that as he was prayed for, he felt this heat go right through him from his head down to his feet. And he was instantly and permanently healed. Len has died now, but it's only in recent years. And this happened in the 1980s. So for all of those years, he was totally free. And at the same time as being healed, his heart was totally changed and he became a follower of Jesus Christ. He tried to get back into the police force, but they wouldn't have him because they said this thing can't be healed. You know, we can't take you back because it's impossible for you to be healed. Well, I mean, he was, but anyway. So he did voluntary work and other things like that in Christian organisations. I think back to when I was 17 on a beach mission. I think back to how I went planning to help and teach 11-year-old girls. I was in my comfort zone. That's what I was happy to do. But when we got there to this mission, and there was a whole bunch of people around my age, and some, probably most of them were a little bit older. There were loads and loads and loads, like 200 teenagers. Not expected. Who were they? Bikies and surfers. They were a rowdy lot. And so our little mission we had was all in tents. Each night there was a program for people like that. Well, I didn't expect 200 people trying to be crowding into this tent, but they all came. They all came to Christian presentations of the gospel every single night for 10 days. They all came. What's going on? And then the leaders said to people like me who were there to do the children during the daytime, come on, forget about the fact that you're meant to be here for children. You are needed. You've got to talk to teenagers, these bikers and surfers, in the evenings. We had no choice. I didn't think I could possibly do it. I was sure I couldn't possibly do it. But in my heart, I still had the intention to be able to speak of what I knew about Jesus Christ. I was not confident that I could do it. So very soon, this young guy who was a bikie came over and made a beeline for me. Why? I have no idea. And he had this young guy, 12-year-old, with him. And I thought, well, wow, what's this going to be about? Because he looked like a really tough guy, you know, and I was a shy 17-year-old girl who wasn't used to dealing with bikies. And what did he come to ask me? He wanted to know about God. He genuinely wanted to know about God. And then he heard people talking about Jesus. Well, how does Jesus fit in with God? And Holy Spirit, what is all that about? That was his burning question. He'd never heard of these things, never heard at all. And so we talked for hours, and as we kind of walked across the bridge back to the other part of the campsite where the bikies were staying, I had to use whatever illustrations I could think of, and I had a torch in my hand. That's what I used. So I said about the torch and shining the beam, and anyway, I was telling him about God and Jesus through the torch. And at first he didn't get it, but the 12-year-old kid did. And so then he could translate to the bikie. So we went like that. And so he asked questions, I give my answers, and then the 12-year-old kid would grasp it and he would say, look, this is really what it's about. And that was telling in a way that I had not anticipated. And it's a bit like Jesus saying, look around you, because you don't expect that sitting here, that today you're going to meet someone who is going to desperately need to know and is actually seeking God. But we don't know when that's going to happen. And if it happens, we need to remember Jesus said, I will be with you always. He's given the command, go, make disciples. That means help them to learn and all of that. But I will be with you. And so we've got to expect the unexpected in order to be able to do what Jesus asked. And I am so grateful when I look over my life that probably more times than not, God has enabled me to speak to people of Jesus when it was totally unexpected. And I didn't think I could. But Jesus helped us. That's our commission. That's actually what we're here for. And if I can just tell a story, it's an analogy, it's not a true story, it's a made-up story, but it gets the point across about who we are as a church. If we take that seriously, we are actually like life-saving stations. If we imagine that the coast is just there, and the ships pass by, and sometimes there's a shipwreck. And then there have to be people coming to shore in their lifeboats, but there have to be people to rescue them, because not everyone is going to get into that lifeboat. There have to be some who will go out. There have to be some who receive, who give warm clothes, who help them to stay alive. And so this little analogy is just a story about that. You may have heard it. Once upon a time, there was a life-saving station, just a little one. But the people who were associated with it were really, really keen to help anyone who was stranded coming off a ship. And so if they would get up in the middle of the night, if the call went out, and so they would go out in their life-saving boat and they would go and rescue people and bring them into their little life-saving station. It was only small. But there, they would help them, they would give them a place to sleep, a place to stay temporarily, and there they would feed them and help them to get whatever treatment they needed until they could get back to their homes or to somewhere else, because homes might be a long way away. But you know, there were people who heard about the good work of this life-saving station, and they thought, oh, this is so great, we're going to financially support them, and we're going to help them to build a bigger life-saving station, and we're going to help them to get better beds and better equipment and, you know, make it comfortable. And what did they do in between shipwrecks? It became like a club, a great place to meet, a great place to socialise. And after some time, people started to think, well, do we really have to still go out sending boats out in the middle of the night? on the rough seas. That's a bit messy. And the people that come in, you know, they're sometimes like drowned rats. Some of them come from other countries, other races, black skin or whatever colour, you know, it's different. Do we really need to do that? Can't we just use our building for a nice social club where we come and get together? They had a vote. And unfortunately, the majority wanted to stop the boats going out. And so those who wanted still to do the job that they'd started were sent out to go and start another little life-saving station down the coast. And after many years, what happened to that? Became just like a social club. And the bottom line of that story goes, if you go to that place, to that part of the coast, you can see many, many social clubs along the coast. And these days, nobody goes out in boats and people drown. We don't want to be that kind of church, do we? We want to be a church that extends help wherever we can to the best of our capacity to those who need it. Well, that's all from me. And we decided not to have the last song because we are going to have an AGM